HMI1, receive Notarian information.
Hello, everyone. I'm Persis Nauman, Vice President of the Fulbright Association's India Interest Group. On behalf of our board and community, thank you for joining today's session, Service Learning in Multicultural Contexts in India, Nepal, and the United States. We are excited to feature an exceptional panel of educators and social workers whose community engaged work spans across India, Nepal, and the US. Today is also the International Mother Language Day, a global reminder of the importance of linguistic and cultural identity and inclusive education. So it's a fitting backdrop for our session today, as service learning in multicultural settings relies deeply on listening across languages, honoring local knowledge, and building relationships rooted in respect. So our India Interest Group brings together Fulbright scholars and alumni committed to connection, that is connecting with each other, with communities, and across cultures. Our mission is rooted in the Fulbright spirit, fostering mutual understanding and strengthening peaceful relations between the United States and countries around the world. Specifically, we work to deepen academic, cultural, and social ties between the US and India. For us, the Fulbright journey does not end when the grant period ends. We see it as a lifelong community, one that stays curious, engaged, and globally aware. So through our events and programs, we create space for members to share their research, artistic work, and lived experiences, keeping the US-India connection vibrant and meaningful. So we create space for members to share research, creative work, and cultural experiences. We highlight service as a form of diplomacy, and we support professional growth through our programming, such as networking events, including chai chats, virtual chai chats, where we finished the first part, and there are 2 more parts remaining. We will send out the information about that, and our upcoming summer retreat in Yellowstone. We also showcase members' work through events like the Fulbright Film Festival, which is available on the YouTube channel that you can watch. Programs such as our Writing Mentorship Series and AI-focused workshop. Linguistic and cultural exchange programs such as the International Mother Language Day, which I'm going to attend right after this event at the City of Asylum. If you're in Pittsburgh, you're welcome to join at 2:30. And also the Pongal Sangamam at Duquesne University in collaboration with University of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University. So those of you in Pittsburgh, welcome to join that as well in March, but also panels and discussions like this session today and our upcoming global health panel session. So before I turn it over to our moderators and introduce our moderators and speakers, I just want to give a quick note. By participating in or attending any of our events, virtual events, or in-person program, attendees may be photographed and recorded by our board members. We reserve the right to use these photos and videos for publicity purposes in printed materials and online. If you prefer not to be photographed, please inform us via our email, our official email, indiainterestgroup@fulbright.org. So I would like to welcome our esteemed speakers today. We have Mary Raukis. She's a Fulbright scholar from 2017 and Fulbright specialist to Assam in 2022, and also a faculty at University of Pittsburgh. And we have our next moderator, Dr. Alia Durham, Director of Community Engagement, Center for Race and Social Problems, University of Pittsburgh. And then we have our speakers, Dr. Patrice Moulton, Fulbright to Nepal, Fulbright Association Executive Board, Vice Chair, Empower Nepal Girls Organization, and also professor at the Northwestern State University. And we have Dr. Jessica Mann, Assistant Vice President, Community Engagement at Duquesne University. And we have 2 amazing professors back from India joining us in IST time zone, Dr. Riju Sharma, Fulbright host, Director, Center for Development Studies and Initiatives, Assam Don Bosco University, and Dr. Bibarani Swargyari, Fulbright host, Head Department of Social Work, Assam Don Bosco University. So without further ado, I'll pass on the invisible microphone to Dr. Rapkis and Dr. Darham. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here.
Well, hello everyone, and good morning or good evening to my Indian colleagues. It was so lovely to see your names pop up on the screen to admit you. Thank you for being here. Uh, First of all, it's just a wonderful opportunity for us to talk about service learning. I tell people that the most transformational experience in my life was my Fulbright specialist position to Assam. I not only learned so much about myself and what my biases were, but also I learned so much about service learning from a very different perspective. I knew how it was implemented in the United States, but I had no idea about other countries. And that actually was part of the reason that we collaborated on a book about service learning across the globe. And so our Patrice and Biba and Riju were part of the writing of that book. So I also want to thank my collaborator, Dr. Dura Malia, who I said, you run service learning here at Pitt. Let's do this together. And she was kindly she kindly said yes. So thanks, Leah. I'm going to start off for a question for everyone. So, and when you begin talking, just go ahead and identify once again where you're from and your role, your function in service learning. But how does service learning function within your educational system? And then I guess the second part of that would be, and how do cultures and traditions shape that? Um, because that was what I identified when I was in Assam. A similar functioning, but very different perspectives. So we'll start. Actually, I'm just going to go by the flyer I have hanging in front of me, and we'll start with Patrice is the first one on it. So Patrice, I'll start with you. So the service learning work that you do for your university as well as in Nepal, and what do you see as the cultural role in shaping it?
Okay, thanks. So again, Patrice Moulton. My role in service learning is that I teach in a graduate program. I'm a clinical psychologist. So I train the next generation of clinical psychologists. And in the process of that training, I travel with graduate students multiple times to Nepal. Um, and the goal is always changes depending on the group. Our students join a larger group of professionals when we go from various backgrounds, and the programming changes upon a combination of two things: the individuals, the professionals, and the students that are coming and what their expertise is. Along with the needs of the community that we will be serving. So it's always a collaborative planning process each year that is very creative and changes. It keeps it fresh and challenging. Our university, the way it fits in our system, is that we are not a school where service learning is a major component of our institution and our system at the university that I'm at in Louisiana, but it is a recognized component. And so it's supported. It is not the focus of our university like many universities have. So you find service learning in pockets of the university, mostly faculty led by faculty that are really interested in a service learning component. And so I think that culture changes the way we do service learning from this perspective. But I also find that service learning from the culture that I'm surrounded with is often it's a component of giving back and often sacrificing something in order to give to others. And that is sometimes the value in that. One of the pieces of value in that is by giving to the people who need it most, is the identification piece. And what I find that's very different when in Nepal, similar and different depending on the area we're working in is that there are times in which there is a different cultural perspective in terms of who the giving is for and who it's appropriate to be giving to. And giving meaning serving. That whole context. I find individuals to be extremely serving in their nature. I find the network of society based on socioeconomic structure to make the giving component sometimes difficult to get to the people who may need it the most.
Okay, we'll probably circle back to that. That's an interesting idea about how it reaches down, right, in terms of who you collaborate with and who also receives it. Because we started sort of on the American side, Jessica, I'm going to move to you and then to Aaliyah, who also does service learning. So Aaliyah, you'll be a panelist in this. But so Jessica, tell us again about your the role that it plays at Duquesne University, my alma mater, and how culture and tradition impacts that.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone, or evening, and thank you for your invitation to be part of this global conversation. Again, my name is Jess Mann, and I am the Assistant Vice President for Community Engagement at Duquesne University, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So at Duquesne, our work is grounded in a Catholic tradition, particularly a Spiritan tradition, which calls us to walk alongside communities with humility and reciprocity and a deep commitment to justice. And so for us, service learning, or what we refer to in our institution as community engaged learning, is not simply about students going out to serve, but it's about building those relationships where community members, students, faculty, and staff learn together and co-create solutions to shared challenges. So for us, service learning appears as an academically integrated pedagogy that connects course learning outcomes to community identified needs. At Duquesne, we have course designations called community engaged learning courses within this larger, broader civic ecosystem that our Office of Community Engagement manages. So it's embedded into courses, research, internships, co-curricular and extracurricular experiences. It's grounded in reciprocal partnerships with community organizations and/or individuals. It includes structured reflection and assessment tied to learning outcomes, and it's supported institutionally through centers like mine and faculty development programs. So I think most importantly, it's not charity, which we can see in faith-based service work, but it is coeducational relationship, right? Where partners are educators alongside faculty. And in terms of the cultures and traditions, in our context, our approach is shaped by democratic ideals of civic participation, commitments to equity and social justice, and our spirited mission of walking with those on the margin. And so we emphasize asset-based community development, mutuality rather than extraction from communities, and critical reflection on power and privilege and positionality. So culture shapes our approach by asking all of us involved in the work, who defines the need, who benefits, and who has a voice.
Okay, thank you. Jess, granted, I went to Duquesne a very long time ago, graduated in 1981 from nursing. I don't believe, there was not this emphasis actually on service learning back in the 80s. So I'm really happy to hear this. And I suspect it's been a relatively maybe recent, maybe in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, I actually my life was changed by community engaged learning. I was a master's student at Duquesne and was also an AmeriCorps community engagement scholar and got to see how this all works. And it changed my entire professional trajectory. But at that time, it was simply an office, not simply, but it was an office of service learning. And there was a mandated requirement which wasn't honoring this, reciprocity because we had faculty and students shooting for specific hours and all the requirements that come from that.
Yes.
So through learning and growing with community, now we have our Office of Community Engagement. So it's been in the works in a more intentional way since early 2000s.
Okay, thanks. And Ali, I'm going to call on you as a panelist since this is the work that you do with the Brown Fellows as well as with the Center on Race and Social Problems. So, um, how does that function in our university at Pitt and sort of the cultural values and traditions that shape it?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to jump off of moderating to jump to the panel. What I would say, Mary Beth, is that our approach is very similar to Duquesne University's with the co-curriculars and looking at both mutuality and reciprocity. But I would also add sort of in the context of social work, we are embedding our core values as social workers at the forefront of that work and helping students who, in the case of programming that comes out of our school, they are non-social work students. And so they are not aware of the core values of social work, right? And so we are trying to impart on them how important it is to understand the roots of our profession, how we ourselves are reconciling with our role in holding up systems that have been deleterious in certain communities in our community, and helping them to understand and to see the way that social work and civic engagement and service learning can be used by students, irrespective of their discipline, to come in with a level of humility and curiosity and work alongside with. And to engage in trust building relationships that end up creating generative opportunities for co-creation of solutions, right? And not to just come in and want to fix people and to fix communities, but to recognize that there is a history of community activists that have been doing the work that sometimes do not get the same level of support, respect, or resources to do this. And so coming from the university, recognize that your stature as a student comes with both the brand of your university that hasn't always been a good partner in that space. And I would say with our school and our university more specifically, having the name of the city as a part of our brand, we, I think, have an even greater opportunity to be good neighbors in the communities where we are bringing our students out to learn about community and to work alongside human service organizations that have been doing the work. And so I think what's been powerful is that we have at the university an Office of Student Affairs along with the Office of Community Engagement. And so they convene all of us as faculty that run programs like the two that I'm fortunate to steward, to talk about best practices, to talk about who are we working with, because oftentimes we go to the same communities, and that in itself can be problematic when we are overloading neighborhoods with opportunity. And because sometimes this is a resource that they don't want to miss, it's hard to manage all of the different units coming in, right? And all they see is Pitt. They don't necessarily can differentiate between social work, public health, education, right? Like it's Pitt coming. So it's important on the university in that context to convene us so that we know who's talking to who.
Okay, thanks. And I'm going to then turn to my colleagues from Mission Don Bosco to ask you the same question about how it functions at Mission Don Bosco and the culture and tradition. I have to say, Riju and Bipa, it was a revelation to me to see how service learning happened in your university. And I tell this story all the time to my American colleagues when they sort of say, well, I do that, but the money is like not enough to do it. And then I think of you guys and how you did so much with, with resources that were actually, as Riju once said to me, we'll get this done. We know people. And so I often borrow that phrase, Riju, when someone says we can't do that because we don't have grant, particularly now, we don't have grant funding. And I'll say, we can do it. We know people. So would you, both of you, just sort of address, both Riju from your role as an administrator and Viva, your role in social work, where good trouble happens, as I recall, talk about service learning in your university, its role and how culture and tradition impacts it.
Okay. Okay. Viva, you want to start?
You can go first.
Okay.
I will add on.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Mary has seen it here. Well, I belong to the Center for Development Studies and Initiatives, and that is kind of the apex body in the university that looks after all the outreach programs and extension programs. And for us, it's been an interesting journey of service learning because earlier, and as you know, we are a Don Bosco institution, so we have the Don Bosco philosophy of service and linking education to communities. So earlier when we joined, it was every department doing something or the other, and as somebody has said, it's very kind of a charity mode, looking at going from a position of power and looking at them as mere beneficiaries. And it was in 2019 that I think we got into the concept of service learning, and it also it did take some time for us to also understand, because earlier it was only service that we were rendering. Now the another word has come, learning. So so we had to really think and restructure that how could we also give service as well as have learning from this for the students. And of course, it took us a little time to really settle down, but I have to say that during that time, we were fortunate to get into a network of Uniservitate. That is, Uniservitate is a program anchored by the Latin American Center for Service Learning, CLICE, in Argentina, and they were looking out for universities across the world, of course, Catholic universities, and we were selected among 20 Catholic universities. And I think getting into that network really helped us, because they have been doing service learning for last 20 years. So we had to really have a shift in our mindset, that now we no longer do for the communities, but working for the communities is more of working with the communities. And as you know, in our university, but of course Biba is from social work, so they already know what it is working with communities. But we have the engineering departments and the pharmacy department. So for them, it was like, it was quite difficult for us to make them understand actually what is service learning. But I think slowly we've put in structures, and we've also institutionalized it in 2020, and following Foucault's 5 dimensions of institutionalization. So now it's more structured, and so it's easy to at least implement it now. Yeah. Thank you. Viva,
Yeah,
I think you can add on
yeah.
what I've left here.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful opportunity, and I will add on to what Professor Riju shared. Service learning, as it has been a long journey at ADBU, and as Professor Riju mentioned, that we started with community engagement initiatives since 2010, different departments having different community engagement programs, and slowly there was also this whole idea about institutionalizing it. And at the same time, if you look at Government of India programs, there were also these institutional initiatives that colleges and universities had to take up, for example, like Unnat Bharat Abhiyan and National Service Scheme. So these are Government of India supported student volunteer programs that encourages young people to participate in community service and social development activities, fostering civic responsibility and leadership among students. So universities also had, like us, Assam Don Bosco University, we had the community engagement programs, and at the same time, Government of India initiatives of creating civic responsibility. So university, what we were doing, and the government programs, we converged it together. And around the time, there was also this felt need to set up a center that could anchor, which Professor Riju is the director. So the center was set up, and it's an anchoring body now that looks in all the social commitment programs of the university. And for the Department of Social Work, since social work is, an academic discipline as well as a fieldwork discipline, we see that service learning aligns very much with what we already do in social work. And at the same time, if you look at the values of, as Professor Riju mentioned, that since we are a Don Bosco Institute, the whole idea that our university's mission of forming intellectually competent, morally upright, socially committed, and spiritually inspired individuals who contribute to social transformation. So that's where we had to align our service learning programs with our university's vision. And that's how service learning is embedded within the academic curriculum as a structured pedagogical approach that integrates classroom learning with community engagement and at the same time critical reflection. And when it comes to context of Northeast India, cultural values such as community solidarity, respect for indigenous knowledge, and collective responsibility somewhere strongly influences the practice of service learning. And we see communities as partners in knowledge creation rather than passive recipients of service. That's how, the whole, philosophy behind service learning is at EDBU. And when we look at social work, we had to integrate it with our curriculum. But at the same time, we also realized that the fieldwork with student engage with is also similar to service learning, but at the same time, we may not, in fieldwork, we may not really integrate all of the full course principles. So Department of Social Work restructured our rural immersion program into a service learning program because as per the University Grants Commission, the apex body that looks into the higher education systems in India, and for the MSW course syllabus, we have a 10-day immersion program, rural immersion program. So we integrated service learning and rural immersion program, and that's how we do it in our university. And as Dr. Riju mentioned, that CDSI is the anchoring body. So every department has a nodal faculty that coordinates the service learning activities of the department. And within the department, we have faculty mentors that mentor each student on their service learning project.
Yes, it is. Viva, I was very impressed by the depth to which service learning, even back in 2022, was embedded in the curriculum, and for the next 30 minutes, what I'm going to throw out one, maybe two questions, and people can answer as they choose to. You don't have to. That was the only question I had wanted everyone to answer. And then at the top of the hour, we'll open it up for questions from our collaborators online. I heard a lot of things, and Aaliyah, chip in if I'm missing one. I heard from all of you about the importance of communities work, that service learning is about, and some of you mentioned in the Spiritan tradition, it's about walking side by side in the Sean Bosco. It's sort of very similar. It's about embeddedness with the community. You're not separate from it, you're part of it. And Aaliyah and Patrice, not from Catholic universities, but from, state universities. You also talk about this, Aaliyah. You referenced how when we go into community, and probably Patrice, the same for you, you bring the name of the university with you for better, for worse, and how we approach communities. So the question is, this shift, right, from doing to being with and being part of and collaborating with, what are And I think, Patrice, you alluded to this maybe a bit. What are the challenges that you face? We have a long history in the academy of, at least in the United States, I speak for my country only, of going into communities to fix or to go in or to harm. I mean, and so that's a long history tradition for us to break. How do we change that? I guess the question is, how do you go into places and be a true collaborator?
And Patrice, as you start to answer, can I ask that you also share what have been the most valuable lessons you've learned in that way as well?
Was that question for me? Okay, Patricia.
For
I didn't
Patrice.
get it. Okay,
For
Patrice. Okay.
Patrice.
So I think so. The first part of that is, how do we collaborate? What are the most important parts of actually making it a collaborative process? And then what has been some of the most valuable lessons or moments in that? So I think that answer kind of goes hand in hand for me with what comes to mind. And I really appreciate that question, because it really has been kind of one of the most rewarding and one of the most challenging components of going into communities. And because we don't always go into the same community, it's a new challenge every year. And so we might be in a small village, we might be in Kathmandu, we might be in an urban area. And we have one group, which is Empower Nepali Girls organization, that is an NGO. We work with various higher education institutions in Nepal. Sometimes we work through the embassy for a project, use them as partners as well if it's an educational project. But often we're out in remote villages. And so the NGO Empower Nepali Girls is kind of our consistent, solid part, right? That helps us know the lay of the land, that helps us plan, that serves as a liaison to whatever part of the country we're going to, because we have girls represented in this NGO through numerous villages in numerous parts of the country. I've been involved with this NGO for 15 years and serve on the board for it. And so I've known the young women that are recipients of educational scholarships. We have 300 girls. And so we have a network of support in these young women that we're teaching to be leaders that also help us in the areas of the country that we're going to. So I would say that not only in planning what we do, when we come, but planning the details of a program with people. And with the people that are on the ground. So we don't even have I hate to use the word trust, but it's not a trust issue. It's an accurate information. Even our primary liaisons, if they're not from the given village that we're going to, they will go, and they call it a scout. We now jokingly call it a scouting trip to the village that we have a project in, to talk with not only elders, but individuals from various components of that village, because the villages are broken down into socioeconomic. People don't like the word caste anymore. There's controversy about whether that still exists or not, but there are definitely stratified groups of people within villages. So to make sure that we have spoken with each of those areas that are represented in the project that we're doing, and we understand the politics of the village as we're entering, to determine what is an appropriate project there. Is the project that someone asked for an appropriate thing for us to be doing? And if so, how should it be carried out? And what types of factors do we need to consider in doing this? So two that come to mind, we have run over 15 years, we have run so many different projects through service learning. So let me remind you that there is always a clinical psychology component to it. If my students are there, that is the service learning part. We have other professionals come that are involved in the service learning, but they're not required to practice necessarily the academic knowledge, skills, and attitudes and have goals along that structure that are measured, that are tied to their reason for being there. So for the students, where the planning primarily happens, we have to agree on the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that are supposed to be addressed during the time we're there with the project that we're carrying out. And then that is also, we set goals based on those things, and then we also assess based on those things, not only for the group that comes to provide the service learning, the service and the learning happens on both sides, but also for the group that is there as our partner. And I'm not even going to use the words to receive the service learning, because I think all of those things are reciprocal. We get served, we learn often more than the group that we show up to lead a project for. And so constructs of that real quickly would be like, for instance, this holds true for almost every project we've done, but three come to mind, and I won't talk about all three of them because of time. So we have done LED solar light projects along with study groups and leadership training. We always combine things that we're doing. We have done medical clinics in remote villages. We did a goat project one time in a remote village, and we have done water projects where we have taken engineers with us, but have gone in with the social aspect of understanding what lack of water means to people, how it affects their lives, and what support is necessary. Each and every time we have had challenges within the political structure of the villages in terms of the logistics of who gets what and what we're allowed to give to whom, so that we don't go in with the best of intentions. If we hand it to the wrong people, it's going to be taken away from them. We're going to completely put an imbalance in the structure of the way the village works. And we don't have to agree with that or disagree with that. It's the way it is. And we need to work with it if we're truly going to be helpful, and not go in thinking that we have answers to things that are really none of our business. And so our job is not to change the structure of the village. Sometimes our job is to raise awareness in the process, though. So an example of that one that has been very impactful for me is we attach research projects to what we do many times. And some of our research is that psychological research that is based on raising awareness and life-changing experiences for everyone involved. So the one that comes to mind there that's most impactful was a project that we did in a small village that we knew for a fact was one of the villages who had many young women who were sold into domestic servitude very early in their life, 5, 6 years old, away from their family, sold for around the equivalent of US $50 to go and work for another family with lots of promises that may or may not come true. And so we attached a research project that was IRB approved. That was a story in and of itself, to interview young women over the age of 18 who had been sold as young children into domestic servitude while we were in the country. So a project happened in this village, but then the research was with young women who had this lived experience in a qualitative study. Super powerful, lots of politics, much understanding needed before we started that in terms of the safety of the girls we were talking to, how that just those mere conversations could change their life, how to approach that, and also how to identify them, and then how to not have them identified in ways that would be harmful at a later date. So there's a million threads to that, but it's really about understanding. It's not about what you're going to do is not the biggest part. There's so much need that there's a million things to do for service learning, to use your skills and apply them from your educational setting into real world. the question is, do you really make a difference and in what way? And for me, the devil is in the details of that, of understanding, doing your very best to understand the structure so that the logistics match the place that you're serving.
Yeah, you wrote about that in your chapter, Patrice, actually, about the devil in the details. Anyone on the panel want to respond to Patrice? If make sure I'm reflecting this right, it's collaboration is a really it's a dance, right? And working within communities, understanding, letting their needs sort of drive it, excuse me, but also understanding that in the process, other conversations can happen, like, as you mentioned, either through the research or just in other ways. But that research was probably very enlightening. It may not change what happens in the village, but it certainly highlights something, right? That maybe down the road may lead to changes. So, other thoughts, any responses to Patrice or this idea how collaboration is a tricky dance to do well, I think.
Jess has her hand up. I think she wanted to contribute.
Yeah, Jeff.
I think that that's where, right, if we're truly engaging in service learning, we have to think about that sustainability component, and that requires us to be adaptable. So if we're thinking about how do we balance these goals, right? Because we have academic goals and we have community development and benefit goals. It has to include intentional design and a shared governance. So I know we talk a lot in academic speak as well as in service learning and community engagement, right? With the theory. But so in practicality, like what that actually looks like to operationalize, you need to co-create projects with community partners, right? Before the semester begins. Like we need to be thoughtful about, right, how we're engaging with realistic timelines, aligning our course learning outcomes, because we're all beholden, right, to the expectations of an institution, but those have to match up with partner-defined goals. And then building in that multi-semester, multi-year, multidisciplinary approaches, right? So that work is sustained. We can't address civic and social issues from one discipline anyway, nor can we all do it all alone. And so thinking about, right, where you adapt or where your research finds the Pandora's box to other projects, partnerships, collaborations, right? Thinking about how that's worked, and then compensating or resourcing people where possible so that it can happen, right? And then, as Patrice mentioned, assessing on multiple levels, both student learning and community outcomes, and recognizing that those metrics aren't traditional often. We're talking about cultural change, we're talking about dispositional and attitudinal changes. And so the metrics that we report to an institution or a funder, right, are only the tip of the iceberg. And so that all needs to come into consideration as well.
So Biba and Riju, at Assam Don Bosco, the work of your collaboration, just from the chapters in the book, for example, one project with engineering has been ongoing for 10 years, right? And other newer ones like mushroom cultivation and the work that both of you did in menstrual health is a bit newer. What does collaboration look like for you in a place where you're working in indigenous areas? Often, the thing about India that befuddles a primarily English-speaking person is how many different languages there are. So working maybe in a place not too far from where they grew up, the students with a language completely different and a culture different than their own. So what does collaboration look like in your space, and how are you working within some very different communities, even within the state of Assam?
Okay,
Uh,
I'll just
yeah.
I'll just start, and then Bibha, maybe you can speak a little more about the menstrual hygiene project. Yeah, Mary, as you rightly said, India is so diverse here. We have almost, I think, more than so many ethnic groups, and as you're saying, just few kilometers away, they speak a different language. Their
Yes.
cultural context is so very different. I think that is quite challenging. But earlier, they would make even the government would have some uniform programs running across the country, and they were not very sensitive to these cultural differences. But now they are. And of course, for us, we have to work within the ecosystem. As you know, in India, we focus on community living. So, and we are fortunate that within near our university, we have almost 40 to 42 villages. Of course, they are quite diverse and all, but we try to work within the ecosystem of the village. Maybe the headman and the village elders, and also we try to link it with the local self-government, their schemes, so that we don't work and we don't duplicate the work. So we try to bring in a lot of convergences and see how best getting the best outcome. And of course, sometimes as academics, as also mentioned, that we for us, time of course is a factor. And we've started service learning from 2021, and now at this stage I think we are really focusing more on research also. So that again plays a very important component of service learning at ADBU. Maybe Vibha, you can add in. Yeah.
Yes, I very much agree to what Patricia and Jasmine and Professor Riju shared about building collaborations and long-term partnerships is quite challenging, and how it becomes important to build partnerships at multiple levels when we are engaging with communities. Yes. So if I have to speak about our experiences, I mean, when we go to a village, as Professor Riju said, that we work with 42 villages in and around our university. So we built our collaborations with multiple stakeholders that are there in these villages. For example, there's an organization called Sri Ram Foundation that works with 12 villages. So if you want to work with those 12 villages, we have a collaboration with SRF Foundation. They work with government schools trying to improve the quality of education. Through SRF becomes our entry point to those villages. I mean, because they have their field enumerators already working on the ground. So that's one partnership we built with SRF, and the other entry point are also the schools and the Anganwadi centers or Balwari centers. So those are centers for early childhood education. So those are also our entry points where we place our students for field work, and then how we built our partnership with the Anganwadi teacher there. And also at the same time, our entry points are also to the women collectives. Because most of these villages have women collectives. So the president or the secretary of the women's collective, the community leaders are also our entry points, where we are building collaborations with them. And at the same time, we also have the local governance system. So either it's the village headman or it's the council president or secretary that becomes our entry point. But at the same time, those are just the what I would say is maybe influencers of the community through which we built our partnerships. But at the same time, also it's constant negotiation between multiple stakeholders to continue our work. So long-term sustainability is really quite a challenge. And also balancing the academic requirements with community priorities also becomes a major challenge for us. Yes. And of course, of course, research is one, we are into it, but at the same time, how do we measure the qualitative outcome of engagement with the communities? I mean, for our students and faculty in terms of our learning process, and at the community also when they are at the receiving end. I mean, it's within that time frame, it becomes really difficult to because we do not have a standard measuring metrics. So
Yeah.
that's a challenge. So I mean, research is one area. I mean, we are slowly looking into it, and also because the experiences of service learning for our student is also very, very subjective. They may not be able to realize the importance of it, or the what you call in terms of their knowledge, attitude, and skills, which they may realize it much more later in their lives. So how do we measure its outcome of student engaging into service learning, and how it has helped them transform in their lives? I mean, that aspect, how do we follow up with students? I mean, so that's also a very important challenge that we face.
Yeah, Bipa, I agree with you 100% on that. In Rishu and I and you and all of us at Assam Don Bosco working on this book with contributions from a lot of places, this idea of trying to capture the impact not only in the moment, but for the community, but later on down the road. And as you said, partnerships change, negotiations are ongoing. And so sometimes what seems very promising, in terms of sustainability and long-term impact may change with new leadership or a shift or a pandemic or something or just a shift in leadership. But this idea of as you all highlighted, this is about student learning, and it has to be done within the framework of all of your educational policies. So the National Education Plan in India, and of course in the United States, with not only our academic disciplines, but overall, Jessica and Aaliyah and Patrice can, have experienced that. It is a challenge. And I think, I speak as someone who does research. I think measurement of service learning is our biggest overall macro challenge. There are a lot of micro and meso challenges that you all mentioned, but I think the larger one as a field is the measurement piece of it. And I think we really need to think differently about, and as you mentioned, the long-term impact. And things that maybe don't seem immediate right away. Even now, like I mentioned, my time in Assam continues to almost impact me several times a week. And sometimes I have to reflect on it. I'll reflect on it later. So these are the things that all of us who teach realize, that the impact isn't seen necessarily right away. But everyone actually, like Jessica mentioned, a transformational moment around service learning. And I've heard that, Leah, from the Brown Fellows who I run into in various places in the city, who said that their time as a fellow in the Brown program changed their career. Those are the very kind of big transformational moments, but they're also small ones. And I agree. I think our next big step is as a field is measurement. We have to do a better job. So I'm going to do a flash last question, and then we'll open it up, which is, what's one non-negotiable for you as someone who is involved in service learning, either for you professionally or for the students or for the community? And Aaliyah, I'm going to include you in this since you also are working with, and Bipa, since we're the last to speak, I'll ask you, what's the one non-negotiable that you feel has to be in service learning? Otherwise, then it becomes something else, whether well-intentioned volunteer work or unintended harm. But what is the one thing that you feel every service learning, regardless of culture, has to make front and center? Don't mean to put you on the spot, but
Maybe for me, non-negotiable in service learning could be reflection.
Okay. By everyone, right?
By
Faculty,
everyone,
students,
yes.
community.
Reflection by everyone. Yes.
Reflection, yeah.
Yeah, and Riju, you also, I know that's a
Yeah,
big
because
piece.
I think service is action, and reflection leads to that transformation. So I think reflection is non-negotiable. Otherwise, it'll be equated with volunteering and this and that. So I think the reflection is quite core to service learning. Yeah.
So, Jessica, what do you see from your position as a non-sort of negotiable in service learning, either as, like an administrator or as someone who has done this work?
I would echo reflection, but if I'm putting my administrative hat on, and coordinating across our 10 schools of study, I always hit home that reciprocity and co-educational partnership. So if the community is not a co-educator and co-designer, it's volunteering and not service learning.
Is that something that you find you have to coach your other disciplines on?
And this is a shameless plug for social work, right? Like there are some.
Oh, it totally is. It totally is.
There are some disciplines that it is inherently built into their like philosophy, right, of the discipline and how a practitioner moves. So things like social work, occupational therapy, speech language pathology, right? Like a lot of applied health. Whereas when we're thinking about philosophy and approach in a school of business, right, we're talking about clients and transactions. And so some more coaching has to happen there. And sometimes we're talking this, sometimes we're getting there with different language, right? So is it a partner? Is it a client? Is it right? At the end of the day, if we're getting to the mutual benefit, shared decision making, explicit learning outcomes, and the critical reflection, you can call it what you want to call it, right? But if we have those tenets, then we're working in this sort of service learning space. But yeah, some disciplines just inherently get it, and some need the training and the paradigm shift to get there. But I will say that our students are asking us for it across disciplines, and we do have faculty that are thinking about, right, what does it mean to be a community engaged practitioner, biologist, business person, right? So thankfully there's a cultural shift happening there as well.
That's great. Patrice, I'll end with you, but Aaliyah, I'm going to ask you as a panelist. So what for you in your work with Brown and other service learnings is a non-negotiable, either as an administrator or as a faculty person coaching students or community engagement specialist?
Yeah, thank you for that. I would say for me, in addition to the reflection, is building in time to communicate what I'm reflecting on to my university, right? Like I need for the folks who are supporting their program to understand that this is what my community partners are saying. This is what their capacity is. These are the challenges that they're dealing with. And so we may need to pull back and give them the opportunity to kind of focus inward on sustaining their organizational infrastructure. And so maybe this year we don't place a student there, and that's not a bad thing. What that means is that we're listening to what they said, and we are reflecting on if we come in heavy-handed and say, but our program needs to, have students in this neighborhood, or you've been a partner with us, like that is damaging, right? And I would say likewise, being able to listen also implies letting our students know we heard what you said. And so how then do we take what your experience was this year and cultivate that and harness that into ongoing program improvement and quality assurance, right? And so this year, because we were in this neighborhood, or this year because we were with this program, this is what our students said, and we're reflecting on it by pulling it into programming moving forward.
Okay. And then Patrice, since we started with you, we will end with you. What are non-negotiables for you as faculty, but also as someone who's, leading student service learning and someone who's really embedded in the community in Nepal, who you've been there, you are have been there for decades, and your son as well, right, as a Fulbrighter.
Yeah. So this one is really interesting for me to answer. And I think the non-negotiable for me is it's going to sound a little odd, but it fits all the way through, is respect. Like respect for the process, respect for all the people involved, respect for the cultures, respect for the need to meet the criteria in a quality manner. And the non-negotiable criteria that goes along with respect for me is that in order for it to be true service learning, that reflection that we're talking about, we often think of reflection in like something that happens after the fact. I think reflection needs to start before projects begin, before things are even decided on what a project will be. That reflection of the people that are involved, what their values are, what their knowledge is, their knowledge, skills, and attitudes before they at orientation needs to start. And then when you start talking about a project and labeling a project, every member of the team that's going needs to clearly identify what their role is on that project in terms of knowledge, skill, and attitude, and what is to be accomplished during that time. That then kind of gives you something as a baseline to work off of in terms of the reflection that happens after the fact. I also believe in like intermediate reflection as a project is happening. So I'll just say real quickly as a quick model that I'd like to share, because it's taken a long time to come to this, and I'll do it very quickly. We start in orientation with that reflection process of the individuals at the time they say they're interested in coming on the trip, and helping them determine if they're really a good match for participating in service learning for that year, for what it is we think we're heading towards. We do this on both sides, by the way. All parties are involved in this. And then that leads to before we leave, there is an assessment. There are goals that are set. There is qualitative assessment questions that people answer for themselves based on what they think, where they think they stand before we leave on certain parameters. Then there are check-ins during the trip that come like daily check-ins, but usually about midway through the trip, there is a reflection period as a team together with the team that we're serving with, I should say. At the end, there are a number of things that happen. At the end, there is a reflection time, the dinner, when the project is over, the night before we leave, there is a reflection dinner. The purpose is for long communication to talk about what we've learned, where we've been, what's happened, where the surprises were, to just reflect on the experience together, followed by a qualitative survey that is handed to them at the dinner that they are to complete on their plane ride home, or by the time, if it's from the team that is on the ground in Nepal, they complete it and turn it in within a 48-hour period. Some of those are Likert questions, which makes it really easy to compare the pre and post. And some of that is qualitative, where we're able to then look at what's happening and code that to see where the growth happened for people, where the surprises were. And it also gives us a lot of ammunition for doing it better the next time, for learning from what we've done and kind of completing that cycle of learning to implement the things we learned from the process. And that is one of my favorite parts of the entire thing, is having a way to not only go learn, change, feel like you're doing something of importance that provides meaning, but what is that meaning, and where does that shake out, and how is that playing out for people? And now we're just now starting to do I'm starting to do some follow-up interviews with team members that have traveled for, previously over the last 5-7 years. Just communicating with them to find out, just simply ask the question, how do you think that experience has impacted your life since the time that you went? Where does that experience show up in your life? Or does it?
It doesn't.
And we're getting I'm getting fascinating answers, and I'm really hoping to turn that into some kind of, I love qualitative research. I'm weird that way. And so I'm weird in many ways, but that's one of them that I really can't wait to turn that into more of a substantial project. I don't think assessment has to be hard. I think it can be incredibly enjoyable for everyone involved. Right. We also give cameras to our people, by the way. Now the people who don't have a cell phone, we give them a camera to use, but I also ask them to capture moments, because it's harder sometimes for I even have my students, but definitely the students from Nepal will often
Mhm.
say, I have trouble finding the words to say what was
Yeah.
meaningful to me. And so I've started to say, then show me.
Mhm.
Like, take photos of what was meaningful out of all. Take as many photos as you want to during this trip. And then part of what they turn in at the end is some photos of moments that are the most impactful to them, either positively or negatively.
Okay. Well, I'll do a real quick summary and then we're going to just open it up for questions from the people who are here. The non-negotiable, certainly thread, the narrative I heard was what makes us different is reflection and reflection at multiple levels. It's students, community partners, and also ways to make that reflection not only meaningful for the individual, but also for the ongoing work and partnership. Patrice, there are so many cool ways to capture that through like photo voice or momentary assessment on a cell phone, if you have cell phone coverage. There's so many ways to try to that we haven't, I think, as a field thought about how to capture that. And as you mentioned, the pivotal moment that for some people sort of changed the trajectory. The one young woman I talked about, I mean, she went on to become a banker, but how she functions in that role is, she said, dramatically different than before she was a fellow and did service learning. And so, they're not necessarily, moments where, all of a sudden people change, but they do make a pivot. And so that reflection is a piece of that. I also heard some things from all of you about having the infrastructure helps, both in the American side and in the planning piece. I heard Jessica very clearly talk about how to communicate from where she sits in her role as administrator in a substantially sized, university across those disciplines, because we do speak a different language in social work than in business. But we have learned to talk across our divide for sure. We've done in service learning in social work and actually in business, but that takes people willing to really, for me to learn about supply chains and for their students to understand like what it really means to go in with respect, right? That was, instead of answers, because that's what they're trained to do. So anyway, opening it up for questions. If you have a particular, and Persis, I'm going to ask for your help with this, if you'd help manage the questions. But if you have a question in particular for one of our panelists, or if you would like to ask it to anyone in general. So are there questions? I saw we have quite a few people from the Pittsburgh Fulbright group. Thanks for joining us today. But also lots of people from the Indian Interest Fulbright group. So questions?
Yeah, thank you so much for such an amazing, electrifying, and humble presentation. We'll open the session for questions. Feel free to unmute and ask question too, so it can be more interactive.
Yeah.
If you would like that, but if you would like to enter your question in the chat, then that'd be amazing too. So we have Xavier, one of our board members, is here, and he would like to ask a question.
Sure.
Yes. Thank you for the wonderful session. I'm, as Percy said, I'm a board member of the Fulbright Interest Group. I was a science fellow in New Delhi in 2010. And so community service is a practice that I last experienced during my college days. I was an undergraduate in Bangalore many years ago. But my question to the panel group is, how did the panelists navigate the religious identity issues, their observations and experiences?
Yeah.
And particularly for our panelists or professors from India, presently, from my understanding, there's a lot of religious nationalism. And how do you navigate that during your community service work?
That is a really good question. Thank you, Xavier. I'll kick it off first with Riju and Biba, since they're operating in the space in Assam, and then if there's anyone else who would like to talk about that from their perspective. So Riju, Biba, what do you think?
Biba, you can start.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the question, sir. Yes. Uh, because in service learning, spirituality is also a very important component as per Foucault's principles. And when we talk service learning in context of multi-religious communities where we work with, at our university, we have what we call it a service learning manual. So in service learning manual, we have integrated religious texts that speaks about service, and how also because we are a Catholic institute, so besides not only one religion, we have multiple texts from the scriptures that speaks about service and how we let students reflect upon their own religious background from where they come from, and how they look at those scripts that are there at their religious holy books, and how they can apply it when they are really going to the communities. So that's one stand which we have taken, and we have integrated it in our service manual that we have it for all our students at the university.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I also echo what Bipa says, because as you know, we are, multi, religious community, and that's how, because every religion talks about it. In Christianity, in I being a Hindu, we the concept of seva, even in Bhagavad Gita. So we leave it open to everybody, and of course, as we said, we've included Andrew Foucault's. Andrew Foucault talks about 5 dimensions, but Eunice Servitate has also given the spirituality dimension to service learning. So I think, of course, it's a very thin line between spirituality and being religious. So, but we are trying to get into it and see how best we can apply it in a very non-biased way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any response from others? Not necessarily in the Indian context, but in places that, because United States certainly has a variety of religions, and certainly some dominant Christian nationalist thinking currently, and but is a multicultural, multi-religious nation. You would have countered this too in your spaces. So I'm just curious if, anyone.
Yes, wanted to share.
Yeah.
Yeah, this brings me back to one of the tenets of community engagement writ large, right? It's that concept of humility. And so we have to practice humility in general, right? About not assuming our worldview is the default. And that's a huge part of the training for students and faculty and staff that engage in this work. But when we're working in interfaith contexts, nationally or globally, at Duquesne, we practice that religious humility, right? So we're leading with a shared human dignity, not a shared belief. And so we structure reflection to help students think critically about how their own identities and values show up in community space. We also structure faculty and staff like development and training for that, to think about from their positionality as well as institutionally. We are a Spiritan Catholic institution. And so how is that mission showing up in a way that is inclusive rather than prescriptive? And so, across context, I think the guiding principle is that we don't have to share the same beliefs to work together. We need to share a commitment to one another's dignity and well-being. And that tends to be, a foundation regardless of the faith identity that can resonate across practices, or with folks that don't identify with a faith identity at all, right? The nature of the work in itself, right, is communal.
True. Other questions from the audience.
Well, I'll give it a try.
Okay, Lauren, thank you.
Yeah, Lauren Hershey. My Fulbright to India was back in 1968. And I kiddingly say I'm 5 months older than India.
Yes, you are. So, Lauren, what's your observations or questions? Lauren, we lost you there. Lauren, we can't hear you. Maybe you could put it in the chat.
So while we wait for Lauren, I have a question. Thanks for such a great presentation. And like you can see so many different lived experiences within service learning in multicultural and multinational context. So one key aspect of any service learning project or institutional integration is the funding, right? So I
Yes.
believe that's a topic that wasn't explicitly discussed in this panel. It may or may not be the scope of this panel, but I thought like I'll bring up conversation around that. If you have questions, and how do you go about, funding related to service learning in general? How do you support your projects and programs?
Yeah, if it's okay, I would love to start that answer
Yeah.
because I feel like it builds off of some of Jess's comments about religion and things like that. So we're very fortunate in the School of Social Work at Pitt to have one of our 2 service learning fellowships endowed. We were endowed by a family, the Browns, who both husband and wife met as social work master's level students. Fell in love in Kathy, the beautiful building behind us that we all know and love as a symbol of, academic prowess at the University of Pittsburgh. And they did not stay in social work. The husband took those values and moved into for-profit space, I believe, in finance. But for him, what was powerful that spoke to his success in finance was bringing in his social work values and meeting his clients, if you will, where they were, listening to what their financial goals were, listening to what mattered to them, and supporting them with their wealth. Right. And him realizing that that was part and parcel to what he learned in social work. And so he and his family then created this fund specifically, again, for non-social work students to understand how we as a profession show up and we lead with our core values. And so this program is now going into year 14. And at year 12 is when the family decided, rather than, making this gift, we see that you all are really trying to be thoughtful, not only about how you are stewarding the funds, but how you are stewarding the concept behind what it is that we want to see students be able to obtain from this experience. And so they endowed it. And so we've been very fortunate to have, the freedom of knowing that we're not going to have to scramble and we're not going to have to worry about whether or not we're going to be able to offer students with this type of very rich, immersive learning experience in the School of Social Work. So we're very excited that, again, these alum from the program who fell in love, who were intending to be in ministry, as a matter of fact, but then moved into finance, invested in the future of students at the university.
Yeah, thank you so much for that response. Because my question itself stems from, Jessica might be aware of, is my own Fulbright research stems or was supported by a community engaged research fund as well from my university at Duquesne. So I'm very appreciative of service learning and community engaged concepts and funding being used or support student research.
So
Thank you.
I'd like to speak to the absolute opposite end of that. So Our university is a very small state, rural university in rural Louisiana. There is not funding for international, there's not a grant. So everything that we do is voluntary. It is students pay their own way. There is a student travel fund through student government that they can apply for that has been very generous in terms of saying yes to our students consistently as they travel, and we're greatly appreciative of that. But it doesn't even completely cover their plane ticket most of the time, which is the most expensive part of going to Nepal, is the plane ticket. So our students come and they pay their own ways. We try to do some fundraisers or find some donors that believe in both international education and service learning. And from time to time, we're successful with that. Most of that falls on the faculty member that is running the program. And so that is an ongoing, ever-evolving challenge for us. It also limits many times, unfortunately, the students who can go, and there's a disparity there that greatly concerns me. But we have worked to occasionally find a donor that will, if we have a student that is just showing lots of promise and desire to be a part of this program that does not have the funds or the means to find the funds to come, to find a scholarship, or at least partial, for them to attend. And so I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, where the school does not have a set funding for these kinds of programs on campus of any kind.
I think for us, we've been fortunate till now because we had the Uniservitate, supporting us to institutionalize it, and they are being funded by Portugal's foundation, and that's how we also award student fellowships. But now it is a matter of great concern. We really have to think, and in fact, Biba and I were thinking we are per department, every department, the university gives us, some funds. So through that, maybe we could, find some way. Or also sometimes we try to put our students into those projects which are funded, like we work with UNICEF on social and behavior change, or, somewhere like this. But it can't be, left like that, with so much of uncertainty. I think somewhere we will have to build a structure so that there's continuity and sustainability, because otherwise it doesn't work. Yeah.
Coming full circle, hearing this and saying that out loud makes me think of the full circle where Mary started saying that we know some people. And, and I think, that's the thread that we run on consistently for our international service learning travel to Nepal, is we know some people and we need to know some more people and we need to meet some people. And we're just constantly working at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I see Lauren here. Lauren, do you want to share your question, or anyone else in the audience have more questions for the panel?
Yeah, Lauren had her hand up, but
I see Lucetta.
Lucetta does. Yeah.
Go ahead, Lucetta.
Hi all. I'm
Can I
wondering.
pose the question?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah, we had some themes that came up in one of the answers a few minutes ago about the sense of community, given the diversity in the United States. And
Yes.
obviously the diversity, excuse my cough. I had tried to state before that my Fulbright was awarded when I was still 20 years old from the University of Pittsburgh.
Yay!
To go to India. We were 21. We did not know what university we would be appointed to or sent to carry out our independent research and teach English language skills. And again, I just have a drop caught in my windpipe. Nothing serious here.
Okay.
And the lessons learned with dozens and dozens of interviews about the British colonial period and the independence movements inform me that it takes a long time for national identity to be established.
Yes.
Here in the United States, yes, we can say 250th anniversary coming up with the Declaration of Independence and ending kingships, but we will have a massive nationwide No King's Day March, again, third one, I believe, on March 28th. So we all have to stay tuned. Question about is really about national identity, and is there something that the Indian scholarly community, wherever located, might take upon itself to take and search its own lessons on national identity, given all the diversities in ethnicities, religions, and so forth, geography and local histories, rural, urban. Now, it happened that I was assigned to the University of Calcutta and the College of Rama Mission College, a little bit then a little bit south of the city, and was on a campus with two private schools, a college that I was assigned to with my colleague John Grace. There was an experimental farm. There was a social work institution for the blind, rather unique at that time. So I got a chapter of the Indian independent country moment. And now we are in 2026. So looking backwards isn't what counts. Are there lessons that you might develop into a kind of a, if you will, webinar a year from now and draw your own lessons and say, America, get your act together. Full stop.
I think that we are in a unique moment in time, but one that probably we have experienced that across the, but maybe unique for Americans, but not for other places in the world. And I think that would be a great webinar. If Lauren, if you have some thoughts, then we could, begin to maybe craft that for Fulbright or for something else. What a unique time to be in India. I've also, and I want to make sure I leave time for that last question, but I've also spoken to Fulbrights. For example, I was in Portugal, and one of the Fulbrights that I connected with had been there in the 70s at the moment when the revolution had ended and democracy was very young. And his experience as a Fulbright there was quite different, right, than mine in 2017 after all those years of nation building. And so I think that would be a really great idea, actually, I'm talking out loud here, as we say, spitballing, but it would be really interesting to have Fulbrights from different times in the same state or place in the world talking about, what changed, what was this, what changed in terms of their their experience, etc. Actually, in the time that we have left, I want to make sure I get to that last question, which was
Lucetta, I believe.
Lucetta.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, a lot of the discussion was around goal setting and measurement and how difficult that can be. And I was also thinking it's like you can plan all you want, but it doesn't often survive first contact.
Yeah.
So I just wondered if any of you have, I mean, I'm sure you do, but how do you change or I guess accommodate potential goal changes on the fly? Like if something happens, like for example, if there was a Fulbright person that, the pandemic hit and things had to change or external circumstances that kind of invaded the Fulbright intent, how you guys dealt with those kind of changes and or accommodations.
Yeah. There is the project you plan, and as you mentioned, then there is the project that that happens when you arrive. We'll just take because of time, if one of the panelists could maybe respond to that in terms of how you, after careful planning and engagement, you've done everything right, and something changed, and how you managed that.
I'll respond to this one really quickly. We actually train our students as part of orientation to plan for things going awry, because it's just part of the process. Like it's not going to go as we plan ever. We're in a different country with a different language in a remote village, and yes, we do all the homework we can do, but it never turns out the way. Not once. For us, though, in our field of clinical psychology, those aren't crises, those are opportunities. And so the same way that when we see clients, we do very careful treatment planning. And then when we see clients, there are always crises that happen that derail the treatment plan that we had, and we have to move to address a crisis situation. Well, the changes that happen when we're overseas in a service learning project aren't necessarily a crisis, but sometimes they are a crisis. And in that same way, that's why we do the check-ins. Part of that is about making the appropriate adjustments at that time and kind of getting everybody on the same page and working to keep everyone on the same page about the pivots that need to happen, an agreement about that it's time to pivot, where we will pivot, and what that means to the process, and working collaboratively with all the members involved to pivot appropriately, like to reassign roles, to talk about how that changes the goal. How does that change what's considered success, a success factor? But to have a conversation as part of continual check-ins about what's happening, where are we with things, and that's just part of the check-ins, is pivoting. Regrouping, pivoting, but understanding what that means to the individuals, to the project, to the process.
Can I add a quick?
Yeah, sure.
So I think that's why it's important that we measure multiple forms of impact simultaneously, right? So your community-defined outcomes that could be water access, literacy rates, food, right? Like you name that. Your relational outcomes, right? So trust, sustained partnership, community capacity, leadership development. Your student civic and learning outcomes, right? Empathy, civic agency, systems thinking, ethical reasoning, and then institutional outcomes. So sustained infrastructure, policy alignment, resource flow, right? So just because one measure of impact is sliding doesn't mean that the partnership writ large is a failure. And also we rely on, I like tangible resources. So we rely on Marshall Welch's OPERA model for service learning. So that's objectives, partnerships, engagement, reflection, assessment. So you're constantly in conversation around, right, your objectives, how those are managed with your key stakeholders, what the engagement does, during, post reflection, right? And then you're modifying your assessment measures as you go. And so you're keeping track of those multiple forms of impact, and you're able to, through those relational outcomes, to figure out, right, the nitty gritty, because planning for the unplanned is the nature of service learning and community engagement in general.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Jess, I would add personal outcomes to that as well, because there's also that personal growth component that has nothing to do with the academics or the project. I mean, it has everything to do with it, but it stands separate regardless of the success or the failure of the project. The personal growth still stands.
Yeah.
So I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a quick reflection as we are discussing here. Because we are working with communities and societies, and they are so dynamic. So as my other panelists shared that, teaching our students on adaptability, adjustability as we go along, and constantly reflecting whether we are at the right track or no, it also becomes so much as part of the process, because I remember once after a lot of planning, we organized a health camp We organized a health camp at the community, and then we pulled in so many doctors, nurses, and then we set up the entire area. And suddenly we are supposed to start at 10 a.m. and by 9:30 we realized that there is a sudden death in the community. And as part of the culture here in our communities, community solidarity is such an important element for our existence here. So we had to cancel the health camp, and all of us had to show solidarity by visiting the family where that happened. So sometimes, many a times, situations are beyond our control, and of course there are times where students get so heartbroken that this is something which we have planned for after so many months, and and that there are situations which are beyond our control, and how in the process we also let students adjusting and adapting to situations that are beyond our control as part of the process becomes very, very important.
Yes. Well, I thank you all. I want to just thank our panel who volunteered to do this on Saturdays. And Aaliyah, you have a question?
No, I was trying to find the reaction where you're clapping your hands.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to give a round of applause.
Thank you. Who gave up your evening, Saturday evening or Saturday morning, and to the people who participated listening to this call. I feel like discussions about service learning happen, but I've never been able to. Part of the book, as well as this, was like, I'd love to see more people engage in these discussions. I feel like it's a niche area in a way, not niche, but I don't hear a lot of robust discussions like we had today about the finances of it, both the good and the bad, the work of it, the learning of it, how we do it well, when how we don't do it so well. All of that, I feel like it gets buried in like departments, and that's why I want to thank Persis and Fulbright, the local, our Greater Pittsburgh chapter, but the India Fulbright Interest Group, for giving us the opportunity, the space to have this discussion, because it's not, you guys were, when I brought up this idea, you were the first to say, yeah, we'll help to sponsor this. So thank you for doing that. And I hope that since this has been recorded, it can go out there to other people who might be just browsing the internet and say, what is this service learning thing? And then learn what it is, and either think about it in their own lives or in their community or in their university. So thank you all for being so engaged in this discussion and for doing the work, which we all know is not easy at times, to work in different spaces and with people that maybe you would not normally necessarily work with, but you find the commonality to work with. So thank you so much. Oh, the title of this book.
I'm
putting it
about
in the
to say,
chat.
you have to show your book so people can see the book.
I actually don't have this book. I gave
wonderfully
away.
hard worked on, and we would like
Thank
to
you.
share that in our newsletter as well. If you
Thank you, Aaliyah. I actually gave my copies away, so I don't have it here.
I'm putting it in the chat.
Yes, creating successful community academic partnerships in service learning. So we have studies from India, our Son Don Bosco colleagues, also from Nepal. Patrice was one of our chapter editors. Also, people from Central and South America, Philippines, South India, from our colleagues at Christ University. So please borrow it from your library, or if there's a chapter you're really interested in, just send me an email and I'll get it to you. Don't let the publisher know that. I'm going to put my email in there. And thank you again for all of your attention, your help, and your interest in this topic. So
Thank you all
Oh,
for joining us
thank
today and for the work you do in your communities. And thank you, panelists and moderators, for enlightening us and reminding us that service learning reminds us of sustainable change, grows through listening, partnership, reciprocity, and a shared commitment to learning with, not just from communities. So thank you for sharing that. And thanks to the Fulbright India Interest Group and the Greater Pittsburgh chapter supporting this project.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you, and
Princess,
have a good
Thank
rest
you
of
so
your
much.
have a good
Saturday.
day.
Yes.
All right.
You all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel free to connect on LinkedIn.